thank you all for coming. Welcome to this year's ELN Café Luitpold side event at the MSC 2023. This is the second time that Salon Luitpold and the European Leadership Network during the MSC, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the last time. Adjust myself. Today, we will be speaking about the role of cyber in the war between Ukraine and Russia, a topic that hasn't yet received as much attention as one might have guessed before the conflict started. That said, attention for cyber attacks related to the war may rise as we are witnessing an increasing number of Russian and Russia state-sponsored attacks on European infrastructure. Lufthansa is such an example, SAS, but also the Groningen hospital quite recently. Therefore, the topic is not only timely, but also deserves much more attention. And this is why we are all very excited to hear the opinion of three wonderful panelists. Before I introduce them to you, I would like to tell you quickly something about the house rules, and then I'm going to hand over to my boss, the ELN's director, Sir Adam Thompson, who's waiting impatiently to give some welcoming remarks. So this is an on-the-record event which is being filmed. You're free to take pictures and post them on social media and refer to what's been said by the panelists. We will start with a discussion with the experts for about 45-50 minutes, and then we'll move into a conversation with the audience. So I know we have some cyber experts among the audience as well, so I would really encourage you to come in. But everyone else, if you're not a cyber expert, please feel free to ask questions and to comment during the Q&A. And now I would like to hand over to Adam for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Julia. My name is Adam Thompson. I am the director, that's the CEO of the European Leadership Network, and I am uncomfortably aware that I am standing between you and an expert panel. So I will make it very quick. One is to say a warm thank you as well as a warm welcome for coming here. Both a thank you to attendees of the Munich Security Conference and also just ordinary citizens of Munich. None of them ordinary, of course, all special. The second is to say a big thank you to Café Luitpold for making this possible. This is a rather special format. It's kind of the Munich equivalent of the exciting, innovative off-Broadway show. And that's always fresher and more fun than the mainstream stuff. The third is to thank the panelists. I will be quick. And finally, just a word or two about the European Leadership Network. I cannot resist the opportunity to advertise something that is completely unique. It's unique because there are not many networks of former heads of government, ministers, diplomats, generals who work on Euro-Atlantic security. It's a whole lot more unique because its membership runs from the western end of the continent all the way to Vladivostok, and we are still all talking to each other. We may not agree all that much between Russians, Ukrainians, and other nationalities across Europe, but we do all agree on the importance of better mutual security and keeping lines of communication open. That is part of the exercise this evening. So enjoy it. Thank you, Julia.
So thank you, Adam. Without further ado, I would like to introduce this magnificent panel to you. And with such high-ranking guests, it's always difficult to sort out with whom I should start first. So we'll start first with the person who had certainly the most complicated journey. So welcome, Sergei Lishchenko. Sergei is a journalist and former member of parliament. When the war started, he became the advisor to President Zelensky, Chief of Staff, Mr. Yermak. Before, Sergei has been working as an investigative journalist for the online newspaper Ukraina Pravda from 2000 until 2014, and he helped to launch the Stop Censorship movement in 2010, and the Chesno campaign that called for transparency in parliament. And in 2013, Sergei was also awarded a press prize by the German Zeit Foundation, and in 2014, he was honored with the NDI's Democracy Award. And if I may cite a recent article in The Atlantic about you that said he has a nose for a story and a knack for being in the right place at the right time. Welcome, Sergei.
Thank you.
I'm moving on to the person who probably had the longest travel, which is Dr. Kenneth Gears, whom I had the great pleasure to meet for the first time in Tokyo when we were both speaking at a conference. The difference was you were speaking in front of an audience of about 2,000 Japanese experts, and they were kind of bewitched by your, not only by your cyber presentation, but also by your marvelous Studio Ghibli PowerPoint presentation, I vividly remember. So Dr. Kenneth Gears is an analyst with very good security, a non-resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council Cyber Statecraft Initiative, and a NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence ambassador. He has served for 20 years in the US government, in the Army, the NSA, Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and NATO. He was also a technical expert to the Tallinn Manual, and for anyone who doesn't know the Tallinn Manual, it is the state-of-the-art cyber document. So welcome, Kenneth. And last but definitely not least, it's a pleasure to introduce Professor Gabi Trever-Rodosek to you. She is a Munich local, but gives very frequently advice to the most high-level people in Berlin, and I hope they also listen to your advice, and tries to make the cyber world a better place through her involvement in initiatives like the EU's Concordia project, which is something we might speak about later. Gabi's Wikipedia page is very impressive. So it's almost terrifying, but I have to limit myself to the key points. So she's the professor of the chair for communication systems and internet services and the director of the Research Institute Code at the University of Federal Armed Forces in Munich. She's a member of the advisory and supervisory board of Giesecke and Devrient, member of the advisory board of BWI, and member of the council of the German National Research and Education Network. And her research is focused on IT security network technologies, on Internet of Things, and smart data. Welcome, Gabi. So maybe my first question to set a bit the scene. We've seen 1 year into Russia's brutal war against its neighbor. It becomes clear that so far cyber has played an important role in the conflict, but not to the extent that many analysts and the broader public would have guessed probably. Cyberwar is so far not the defining element of the war, yet dynamics in cyber offense and defense have influenced how Russia's operations were conducted, how Ukraine responded to these cyber and kinetic attacks. And I have a question to all of you, and that's, are you surprised how the Russian cyber campaign in Ukraine has been conducted so far? Is there something specific that stands out for you? And maybe I would like to start with you first, Say.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for being with us this evening. My general overview of this war, that this is completely different from what people expect war going on. This is a war when we have combination of traditional weapons and the combination of digital achievements of the humanity, let's say this way. I would frame it wider. For instance, mainly our confrontation line is like 5-7 kilometers between Ukrainian and Russian troops, and to make progress on the front line, army use artillery with very tight connection with internet, with drones, and with digital internet. So all data is used by both sides to make precise shelling, if it's possible to use this terminology, not to waste ammunition, but to make as closer to the targets as possible. And this combination of digital era and traditional artillery is very visible. Unfortunately to say, but maybe this is the last war in our planet, and next wars will go on by this scenario. Combination of drones, artillery, and internet data collected in one place. For instance, all Ukrainian soldiers who worked with artillery, with tanks, with mortars, all of them use planchettes. And in these planchettes, they have special program called Krapiva, it's Ukrainian word. So in this program, soldiers can put their targets and have exchange of targets between different battalions, between different brigades. And the coordination of hits is done through this program. And of course, in this situation, digital security is very important. So I have this long introduction to the topic. And in this war, which was not provoked by Ukraine, which was started by Russia without any legal purposes, there is a combination of consequences, not only destroyed cities and thousands of people died, but also its direct impact on food security and digital security as well. In the beginning of the war, Russia tried to attack, and even before war started, before full-scale invasion started in February last year, they tried to attack our databases and the energy sector. And the energy sector was, from the beginning of the war, one of the main targets for Russia. And before full-scale invasion started, they tried to destroy our digital security of our energy sector. For instance, we have a company called Ukrenergo, which is responsible for energy consumption in the whole country. And of course, all process of business is built on digital data. And they tried using the hacker attacks, cyber attacks to destroy the system. But then the full-scale invasion started, and we understood that this problem was just very little problem, because when you face full-scale invasion with artillery, with attacks by cruise missiles, by rockets from aviation, from tanks, it's incomparably much more difficult to resist. That is why I think in this situation, digital security gonna be one of the main skeleton of modern and secured countries. So they have to care a lot about this, because in this war, aggressors and dictatorships, they just test in different ways how to destroy sovereign countries or how to attack. And sometimes they will use not direct invasion, but use another approaches, including attack through cyber instruments.
Thank you very much, Sergei, for setting the scene. The question how well are other states, European states, NATO, prepared for these types of attacks, it's something we will probably address a bit later. But I would like to turn to Gabi for the same question. Are you surprised how the cyber campaign is being conducted? Is there something that stands out for you?
Mm-hmm. May I quote Ambassador Ischinger? He said 1 year ago or 2 years ago that actually in conventional traditional wars, we count tanks, ships, airplanes. In cyber, we don't say what we can, the capabilities. And so it's an illusion to say if we don't hear a lot, that it's not happening a lot. And so I think it's very good that we don't hear a lot, because then the defenders who are doing cyber defense are doing good work and good part, so that we don't experience this. And it's clear.
I think that you know, what I was saying earlier, I do fear that cyber attacks just too often work, right? Whether it's denial of service or doxing a company. You know, this is possible for hackers to do, but yet I still feel that if we remain united and patient, there's going to be some pain for sure for the individual targets of cyber attacks. But at the national level, you know, Germany, even Ukraine, I think we're strong and will survive. But that's not to say it won't be painful for the victims of a cyber attack, for sure.
Gabi, do you think we are already united and patient enough?
I would not say enough. We are on a good way. Building, for example, cyber threat intelligence, sharing information, data, intel about incidents, about attack vectors, and so on. But still, we need to improve even more because we need to be a strong system together. And this is certainly something as the next steps to be more united. Since the point is certainly, if you see the attack vectors and also the defense measures, we are still too static. Yes, all the firewalls, intrusion detection systems, whatever we have, this is static attack and vector or the surface. What we need to do is here also dynamic more. So make a dynamic attack surface, like moving target defense approaches, for example, and so to be more flexible. So I think we have also a lot to do in this area.
Before I open the floor to the audience, because I think there will be many questions in the audience as well, Sergei, I have a question for you. So in January, it was made public that Kiev is seeking to convince the International Criminal Court to investigate whether certain Russian cyber attacks qualify as war crimes. So as a reminder for the audience, there's an ongoing ICC case addressing other activities by the Russian armed forces and whether they fall into the category of war crimes. Cyber attacks are not yet recognized by the court as a form of war crimes, and Kiev would be certainly breaking ground if this request was successful.
Specifically for our discussion, I called our main activist in prosecution of Russia, and the position of Ukraine for today is that there is almost no chance to get Russia into International Criminal Court because Russia did not implement it and did not implement Rome Statute. So our idea is to establish a special tribunal on the crime of aggression against Ukraine, which will be framed by the same legal frames of ICC, but it's going to be a separate, specific institution which has to investigate this whole crime of aggression conducted by Russia. And the basic crime or mother crime is military aggression, which caused a lot of consequences globally, including, as I mentioned in the beginning, cybersecurity consequences, food security consequences, and which had impact for 94 countries with population 1.7 billion people. And this crime of aggression is recognized as repeated because first aggression is 2014, which was recognized by European Court of Human Rights. And in this frame, I think Ukraine legal institutions will target Russia.
Thank you. I would like to open the floor now to you, the audience. I think Stefan needs a microphone.
This one, and you share this one, okay? So who will be the first one? Okay. I may keep the phone. The mic. Okay, thank you very much. Hiro Akita from Tokyo. My question is very simple. Could you give me worst possible scenario you can think of that could happen in the near future by the cyber attack?
Shall we collect some?
Second one.
Also, very simple question. So leaving aside drones and targeting artillery and leaving aside information operations, talking purely computer network operations, like that part of the cyber domain.
I don't hear
Isn't Russia's performance as underwhelming as in all the other domains?
Third one, third and last one?
And the third one, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then...
You will keep it. One more question about the private sector, I would say. We have a very peculiar situation in Ukraine related with the Starlinks. When Starlink initially became key to sustain that access to digital connectivity, let's put it that way, for the army that be or for the civilian population in Ukraine, I just have to mention that even up until now, all the digital services were uninterrupted, so to say, for the citizens of Ukraine, inside of Ukraine and outside of Ukraine. Pretty remarkable. I mean, Sergei just mentioned the work of the Minister of Digitalization. But now we have that change of approach of Elon Musk, so to say, towards the war, and how his company, so to say, will have to behave vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine, meaning Russian invasion to Ukraine. So my question is that if we take it as a lesson for the future, how we can ensure, or should ensure, that while we're driving innovation and creativity, the private business is not becoming an impediment for ensuring actually sustainability of action in cybersecurity in the future, so that they are part of the solution, but don't become capricious element that can change because of the conflict of interest or any other reason that Elon Musk in this case could have vis-a-vis this war situation, to the detriment actually of strategic outcome.
Thank you. So we have Akita-san's question about what is the worst possible scenario, Frank Sauer's questions about whether Russia's performance is terribly underwhelming, and then Eka's brilliant question. So who would like to go first? You want to go?
I just stand second question.
The second question was whether Russia's performance in the cyberspace is as underwhelming as its performance on the battlefield.
You know, as I told, we don't see big success of Russia on digital attacks against Ukraine. Our public services working properly, our banking system working properly. We have plenty of digital banks, which are very progressive, and when our temporary displaced Ukrainians living in Europe, they're saying that the Ukrainian banking system is much more digitalized, and a lot of things can be done without physical visit to banks. So our progress in digital sphere is very visible. And of course, as I told, there were a few examples when Russia had cyber attacks, but it was fixed very fast. So they have no visible progress in this sphere during this last year. Before war started, they had a series of digital attacks, which were fixed very fast. And comparing what happened after this, of course, no one even remembers these stories. And Eka's question was about lessons for the future, how not to let private business to be, you know, we cannot predict the future in sense how it's going to be combined. But of course, after the war, states everywhere will invest much more into digital to be independent from private business, or to make much closer relationship with private business, not to let business dominate in this sphere, because issue of security is issue of state. It cannot be fixed with private entrepreneurship. Sorry to say it, but it's a direct obligation of government to defend territory, to defend the state. And I think it's clear for everyone. At the same time, of course, Ukraine appreciates help provided by a company called Starlink. I'm talking about, for instance, railways. I'm working in Ukrainian railways as a member of supervisory board, and I know that Starlink is one of very needed in cities after deoccupation. For instance, when regional capital Kherson was deoccupied in autumn last year, people in the city suffered without internet, without electricity, without water supply, without mobile connections for a long period of time. And the Ukrainian railway established so-called center of security and protection on the train station using Starlink, and hundreds of people just came to the train station to use electricity from train station. We provided by the generators and used internet provided by Starlink, and people had opportunity to call their relatives first time for many weeks using internet on train station. So I cannot comment another sphere of internet used by Ukrainians, but if we speak about railways, it's very visible, and it can be used everywhere, even in the move, which is also very important.
Maybe I try to answer also simple questions. I think I would a little bit disagree, because the private sector is so, as we see, important that actually we need a cooperation. National, state and private sector together need to work together and to defend also the whole national security. And especially to your question, well, it's difficult to predict what scenario could be. Either we have, so for example, the attack of the critical infrastructures, so that we have blackouts and something like this, and because IT is everywhere and we are so interconnected, and the attack vectors are so evolving with new technology. So it's quite difficult to predict. The question is, of course, how we can estimate this and how to build this, I would always repeat it again, resilience. So to make redundancy, to make robust systems. And so also, for example, for the Lufthansa, the cables that have been broken there, this is, could be a better resilience. So if we have redundant cables, some for the, it would maybe not be so difficult. And so impact. And we're always building resilience, we always have estimating of risks. So what is the biggest risk and how to defend the biggest risk? And so I think this is the most important part here.
So I think a couple of candidates for biggest hack ever, I think, are the 2016 Democratic National Committee attack, right? We've said it was the GRU, or the Russian military hackers, and some people say that they put the wrong person in the White House, right? So, I mean, it's hard to imagine a bigger hack than that. And then on the financial side, not Petya, I think in 2017, it took 5 years to count the cost, and I don't know if we'll ever get a good estimate, but so many companies suffered so much financially and in terms of lost momentum. Your question, I think, on Russia's underwhelming performance, I think, if you have a bad strategy, then you have tactics that also look bad, right? So they're intimately connected with each other. And I think Russia, when it's sending its parade uniforms, on the first day, across the border, and they also, the strategy, Putin just failed to understand what he was doing. Right? Taking over Ukraine was a much bigger task than he ever imagined. And I think so it was a failed strategy and then failed tactics. Another way to look at it, I think, is the, in international relations, there's this idea of soft power. And soft power is when people help you because they want to, not because they have to. If I force you to help me, that's hard power, right? But if you like me, and you want to help me, then that's soft power. And I think that if you look at all the governments helping Ukraine, all the NGOs and private sector, and even individual hackers, I've met a few over the past year who say, in my free time, I'm trying to help Ukraine, right? at home at night. That's really pretty powerful, and I don't think Russia has anything like that kind of soft power that was, again, probably not, put on the whiteboard in the Kremlin when they were dreaming this up. And then one more question, I think for private companies, I think we need leadership. I think national leadership to explain things like rules of engagement, to make it clear, Because the fact is Cisco and Microsoft and you know, in France, Orange, and you know, and the Deutsche Bahn and everything, you know, in each country, these are critical infrastructure, and so they need to understand that they're part of national security infrastructure. And so that's really going to require leadership, I think, to work, you know, public-private partnership on these things. So rules of engagement, how do you defend and how do you, you know, support Germany and France, etc. And then we could talk about something like Article 5. You know, Article 5 is a concept, one for all and all for one, at the nation-state level in NATO. And NATO and the EU have been collaborating quite well, I think, since February 24th. These are things that national leaders could explain to critical infrastructure providers, I think, to give them some inspiration and some understanding of how they fit into a bigger picture.
Thank you. Let's do another round. Maybe collect another 3 questions.
Very simple first question. Could you tell us a little bit about the digital competences, especially in cyber war, in comparison of the 2 countries of Ukraine and Russia? And second question is, I think you, Kenneth, mentioned the different phases of counterattacks. Are they somehow linked to a brain drain or emigration of Russian IT engineers, from what we have heard, so that the capabilities might be weakened within the last 12 months?
Thank you. Second one.
Yeah, I'm actually asking 2 questions. Sorry for that. For one question is for building resilience, digital resilience. To what extent would it be? To what extent, let's say, a decentralized, even traditional or analogous solutions could contribute to building this resilience? Because let's say, if you have a digital, if everyone is communicating digitally and you're using a traditional radio or even a letter, then this is not as easy to attack, of course, as digital networks. And my second question is especially to you, given the rather polarized nature of international politics, do you see any chance, let's say, for Western countries to expand their ideas of global digital governance or international law, let's say, beyond Europe and the North Atlantic?
Thank you. I have a couple of more questions down there.
Thank you, first of all, for this brilliant analysis from 3 different perspectives. I have a pretty broad question. We saw in the past that countries have been really reluctant to attribute cyber operations / attacks politically and also legally. Do you see a shift, and if so, what are the requirements to do so, like attribute to then persecute on an ICC level? Thank you.
All great questions. Who would like to start? Maybe Kenneth, and then the other way around this time? Or shall we start with you again, Sergey? Or we start with Kenneth? Make a decision.
Different types of questions, but that's good because, you know, the internet is used for everything, right? I think we do afraid that interest in Ukraine might wane over time and the alliance might weaken, but I think that this is not going to happen because in the case of Ukraine, this is existential for Ukraine, and so it is not only, you know, of life and death importance for a country we're all looking at and focused on, but we understand that if we fail here, that it's coming this way. And so I think that the problem will come closer, right, to Germany and closer to each country. So I don't really worry that it's weakening, I think, the alliance at this point. And looking toward other countries, you know, it's one of the things I think we really need to focus on is democracy. And there is, I think the internet looks a lot more like democracy than it does autocracy, right? And so some of the surveillance and targeting powers of the cyber tools are great for dictators, right? And so that will help them in the short term. But I'm hopeful that in the long term, the internet is so much closer to a democracy and bottom up rather than top down. Not to say, again, we're not going to have attacks that work that we have to figure out, but I think that cyberspace is unpredictable and evolving quickly, and those things are not good if you're a dictator. So I think we need to focus on those positives as we reach out to other countries outside of the EU and NATO. And the last question?
The last question was about countries' reluctance in terms of attribution, right? So if there's a shift and countries are more likely to...
So I think that we've been doing attribution for a long time better than the average observer knew. But it was more of a political question of how and when to show your cards, right, at the table. And of course, this horrific Russian invasion of Ukraine basically gave, private companies the motivation and inspiration to get involved. And it also, as we saw, especially in the United States, I think the selective release of classified information to disrupt Moscow's plans.
Maybe just additional comments. Attribution is always difficult. If you're a good attacker, then you can masquerade it and you can Tor whatever using. So to really have direct then attribution to who is really attacking. But I think especially resilience, if you build resilience, I would a little bit disagree that the internet is, as it is, good for democracy, because we need to evolve it. We need to go to the next step. And next step is security by design, privacy by design, value by design, and security by default. And so with these principles, with these 4 principles, we need to design our IT systems, because they are where we are moving now. We are moving to self-managed systems. So self-protection, self-configuration. The network will protect itself. And we need to build such systems. And only with these 4 principles, having in mind self-protecting and so on, we can develop systems where we can also rely on it. Imagine you have AI algorithms. You need to trust the algorithm. What is the outcome? Why you get a credit and I don't know. I don't. So it's much more that we need to invest in the design of the systems, trustworthy, then secure, resilient, than we did before, 5 to 50 years before the internet started. And only if we do with this, we can really build resilient systems. And not just the system, but also the processes. It's the society, so it's multi-level, actually. But starting with the systems, or the network, where we have really autonomous system, self-managed, we talk about here zero-touch management. So no people will be there. The systems will be managed autonomously, But how do you trust that they are really, if you don't design in the correct way, so that they can also not be manipulated, that they are really doing as you wish to. And if we are moving to 5G and 6G networks, especially 6G, then we have only zero-touch management. It's not possible that the person is there seeing how I configure a router or a network, or saying, oh, there we have maybe a problem. And this is a completely new paradigm we are talking about. So no people managing systems, saying who were the attacks and defense, but really autonomous system that defend the network and the system.
Nothing to add, because you're a specialist. I'm not so much in this. But I think the world gonna be different, and it's better to support Ukraine now than to face much bigger consequences, much dangerous consequences in a middle-term perspective. And we are paying our price on behalf of the whole Europe. Frankly speaking, it's in your interest, us, to win as soon as possible, and not to make this problem for a long period of time. And again, let's stop this experiment sooner than later, because Russia is demonstrating unique ability to work in difficult environments. They have no access to technologies, they have no access to markets of European countries, of US, but still they have not so big problem with their economy. They found a way how to take drones from another autocratic regimes, from Iran, maybe from North Korea as well. I believe the activity of Russian foreign minister traveling in some African or South Asia country is not just because he is looking for support in UN, but maybe he is looking for ammunition, which is stored in these countries as well. And it means they are ready for long-term war, and it's not in our interest. Believe me, we should not do this.
I think we have time for final round.
I see you. I come to you as quickly as possible. Over there, is there someone else? I start with you, maybe. There's one other question coming.
All right, thank you very much. So thank you very much for the insight, first of all. And second of all, I would like to ask, maybe from the other side of the table, what can be done to ensure a cyber-secure network for corporations moving into Ukraine in the near future, for when it's being rebuilt, hopefully at some point, or even before that corporations from Europe can safely invest and expand into Ukraine? Like what cybersecurity can be implemented already now, learning from what is taken against Ukraine right now?
Thank you. Someone else? No? So go ahead.
Maybe we start with Gabi.
I will start with me because I have very little knowledge about it. I'm not in this sphere in general, but of course what is important to see in Ukraine now that digital government is a big part of traditional government. And we have special ministry on digitalization, deputy prime minister responsible for this, and he is one of the top 5 person in Ukrainian politics, very promising person, and he has 100% trust from president. The guy who in wider sense, not one person, but he and his team in direct contact with all Silicon Valley companies and direct contact with Elon Musk and so on. So it means that this part of government is very influential inside Ukraine, is very welcomed outside with their expertise, and in future they will be, I think, core of the new state built after our victory.
Nothing to add.
And on this note, maybe I have some takeaways from that panel. You can vividly disagree if you like, but from Gabi I hear we definitely need better resilience, we need foresight, we need better collaboration on the European level.
Not only European,
yeah.
Western level. And this includes US, Europe, Japan, South Korea, so to really cooperate in much more tighter fashion that we are used to cooperate now. I think what we learned, that we need to move faster and we need to move together. And especially in this area, I think it would be good if we were to do this.
Thank you. Kenneth, from you, I mean, one positive note, you think that the internet is better designed for democracies than autocracies, which I found surprising. but I like that thought. You, Gabi, think it's on us to design the internet to be better suited for democracies. So I see, you said like you disagree, but I see some common ground here. Or maybe not.
I would never disagree with Kenneth. No,
that's nice to hear.
Certainly. We have the possibility of information. Everybody from us can support information. Therefore, Ukraine is also successful. The question is that we have the internet of the next stage. And the internet of the next stage is different in terms more autonomous, more self-managed, and but it's also democracy, so it's not changing so deeply.
If I may, what is important in this war? That because of internet, Russians cannot say that they had no idea what happened in Ukraine. After Second World War, sorry to say this, but Hitler created a system when a big part of Germany said we had no clue what happened in concentration camps. We did not read about this because it was not in public domain, and it was kind of surprise what really happened. Now Russians cannot say that we did not know what Putin did in Bucha or in Mariupol or what is going on now in Bakhmut, in Soledar and so on. Russians cannot say this because everything is available 24/7 in the internet, and they have billions of opportunities to read the truth. So they cannot say that, oh my God, we just watched Russia propaganda and it's a surprise for us that the Russians killed civilians, raped women, and killed children. No, they cannot. This is a very good argument to say that war is different, world is different, and it will create problems for future tribunal for Russians to say what they are going to use as a defense strategy in this court.
Just absolutely agree, but just to add, this is also two sides of a medal. I can also use disinformation to manipulate. And you see actually what's happening today is also that a lot of bots, social bots, are working against other bots.
But disinformation exists in Second World War as well. It was based on disinformation. Now we have always opportunity to check what's really going on. I'm just saying that disinformation exists in Second World War. It was even special minister of disinformation in Second World War. In this war, the same. We have disinformation of Russia using the internet, but the internet let Russians to learn really what's going on, learn the truth, which Germans did not have opportunity to do 75 years ago. 75 or 80.
All right, I think the last word belongs to Sergei.
Nothing to add. Again, I just finished on what I was trying to say, that we are facing new era, new reality, and as soon we accept that the world is not gonna be as it was before, it's better for everyone. And that one who start to learn the lessons of this war faster, that one will be more competitive in future. And I have some people trying just to provide Ukraine some services which are very expensive, but for free, just to have data from Ukraine to learn a lot of things, what's going on for future, you know, it's interesting. I think it's time to learn Ukrainian lesson. I mean not only about how weapons used, but a lot of things, because a lot of not just technologies, but approaches and politics which were, you know, prepared in advance 5, 10, 15 years ago, and now used, like all skeletons are open now. And we see what all cards on the table. Everyone can learn from these lessons. And it's not gonna be, maybe war gonna finish soon, but this confrontation of democracy against autocracy it's a long-term game. We should, if we are on the side of democracy, we should stay together, of course, and learn the lessons of Ukraine as much as possible.
Thank you very much, Sergei. Thanks to all three panelists. This was a wonderful discussion.
Thank you very much for this deep insights. I think we came quite close to Benedikt Franke's aim, CEO of MSC, to reach out to ordinary citizens, and that for lived deliberative democracy. Thank you very much. And I'd like you to make a special round of applause for Julia Berghofer. She organized this whole event. Thank you very much. So see you next year for an official side event by default. That's what I learned, by default. So see you. Have a nice conference. Thank you very much.